I don't know about you, but I have always dreamed of solo traveling and spending a few months in a different country. But like most people, that just doesn't seem feasible for one reason or another. But today's guest is going to change your mind on that. Malia is the founder of Little Miss Finance and is currently a digital nomad traveling around Southeast Asia for 4 months while working and sticking to a budget. Malia does such a good job explaining how this is possible. So if you're interested in traveling or just curious how extended solo travel works, this episode is so good. So let's get right into it. Welcome to the Life You Love podcast.
We're your hosts, Grace Lemire
And Erin Convertini.
This podcast is for the dreamers and the doers.
For the women who want to create a life they genuinely love waking up to.
We believe that life's short, so let's build one we love.
Malia, welcome to the podcast. I already gave everyone a little introduction into who you are and what we're talking about today, but can you introduce yourself and then also tell everyone where you're calling from? Because I actually have no idea where you're calling from. So would love to know.
Of course. I'm happy to be here. And we're missing Grace today. So
I know.
sad to not have her here. But as Erin mentioned, my name is Malia. I'm the founder of Little Miss Finance. I explain my job as a financial educator. I teach personal finance, but I also love to travel. And that's currently what I'm doing. And so I'm calling in from Hanoi, Vietnam.
Okay. Yeah, you've been all over the place. And I was saying before we got on here when Malia and I were just chatting and catching up that I've been following her on socials, like following all of her adventures and everything, but we haven't gotten to catch up about your solo travels and where you've been going and the logistics of everything between money, budgets, all of the things, because I feel like so many people are so curious about solo traveling. But let's talk about work a little bit because you did kind of mention that you're a financial educator and like everything that goes into that because most people can't just take off for an extended period of time. If they want to solo travel, you have to work while you're over there. So what does that look like? How have you been able to continue doing your job while you're traveling?
Yeah, I feel like everything that I love in life that brings me fulfillment, teaching personal finance, travel, having personal finance foundations, it's just everything is connected to each other. I feel like I can't talk about one without talking about the other. So, starting with my work as a financial educator, I have spent the past 2.5 years self employed. And the work that I do is really under that umbrella of teaching personal finance, but it's many different things. I teach a couple classes at a local community college as an adjunct instructor. Right now, those classes are online, so that provides remote work. I do a lot of speaking engagements where I partner with businesses and organizations to come in and host, say, a lunch and learn or an educational session to teach personal finance, help them better understand their benefits at work, whatever it might be. Sometimes those things are online, sometimes they're in person. In this season of travel, I've just postponed some of those in-person events and then have been taking things online as they come. I also do one-on-one coaching. We all know how personal finance can be. Everyone's looking for some specific tailored education or guidance to their own situation. So I do one-on-one coaching, which again, often online via Zoom. And then I create content under the handle Little Miss Finance as well, which obviously online. So a lot of people want to know, how do you travel and how do you work? What type of work are you doing? That's kind of what I've got my hands in right now, and the way that a lot of it can be done online that allows me to take more extended trips, but still be plugged in, still earn some money, and try to just, balance all the things.
That was the first thing that came to my mind when I saw that you were traveling for an extended period of time because I have been following you for a while and I know you do a lot of in-person like speaking engagements and workshops and and if you don't follow Malia on Instagram, her Instagram is so awesome. We'll plug everything in the show notes of this episode. But yeah, so I was like a little bit confused how that was going to work. But that's so awesome that you get to do them remote and can kind of just like postpone the ones that don't suit you right now and you can kind of pick and choose. And we'll get into like the finances of all of this as well. But can you talk about like a little bit about where you have been going? You said you're in Vietnam right now. How long have you been traveling for?
Yeah, travel has always been a huge part of my identity. I grew up always taking small trips with my family that were 110% balling on a budget all the time. And I realized how much I learned from my parents through their actions about aligning your values and spending your money in line with those values, because we did not grow up with the nicest house or the nicest cars, but we would go on vacation. And I'm already going on a tangent, but this is just such an important life
No,
lesson.
go on the
I feel.
tangent.
In eighth grade, I have this specific memory. We went to Hawaii and my mom found this really great deal on a place. We found affordable airfare. And so it wasn't a $10,000 trip. It was still very much a budget trip. And growing up, when I would like compare myself naturally to my friends, go to their house, I felt like they always had nicer houses, nicer cars, newer things. And when I came back from that trip in eighth grade to Hawaii, I remember someone saying, "Oh, so you're rich," because I had gone to Hawaii. And I remember being so confused because I'm like, what? No, my family is not rich. Of course, we're a very middle class, well off family in the greater scheme of things, but I never considered ourselves rich. My parents just always had, 15-plus-year-old cars. We lived in a house that was built in the early 1900s. Always something needed to be done. So my point that I'm trying to make is my parents were very good about being intentional with their dollars and spending it on things that they knew brought them joy. They knew it wasn't the newest, latest, and greatest car or the home renovation or whatever it may be. And to other people's perspective, they thought that that was something that rich people do. And yes, that we were very fortunate to do that. But the point I'm trying to make is when you get intentional with understanding and recognizing what brings you fulfillment and happiness, and then you spend your money in that way instead of keeping up with the societal norms or on social media, whatever it may be, it's mind blowing how much more you can do and how much more fulfillment you have in life. So I don't even remember, Erin, now the question, but
No, I love this tangent because I feel like we talk about this all the time just inherently, but it is like I always find myself coming back to this because it is easy to kind of like, start keeping up with the Joneses unintentionally and like without even really realizing it. All of a
mhm,
sudden you're spending your money on things that you don't value. And then you're like, wait, but
mhm,
I do really want to go take that trip, or I do want to do X, Y, and Z, but I spent it on all of these things that don't
mhm.
actually bring me that joy. I definitely find myself doing that a lot. So it's good to kind of come back to. So you decided that
Yeah.
you wanted to take this solo trip, and that's where we're at now.
Yeah, yeah. I so grew up always with those values and I have enjoyed traveling. I will say, sidebar, my mom started working part-time for an airline, so I do have some benefits and flexibility when it comes to flights, but I'm always still balling on a budget as well. I've had the privilege to see a lot of the world. I've done a lot of Europe, but I've just had this desire to do Southeast Asia, which is the region of Vietnam, Cambodia, Laos, Thailand, Indonesia, Malaysia, everything in that southeast corner of the continent. It's a far ways away from home. There's a lot to see. It can be expensive to get here. Once you're here, it's quite cheap. So I knew that I wanted to spend a certain amount of time doing that. And so I would try to be a bit proactive. A few months back, the end of 2024, I said, you know what, I'm going to do it. Q1 of 2025, so I can start telling people, no, I'm not available for something in person. So I blocked off my calendar to head to Southeast Asia. I didn't have much of a plan. I kind of fly on a whim when I travel. And I'm doing it solo, not necessarily because I'm so like, I want to do this solo, but it was more of I'm not going to wait around for anyone else to join me, or will never happen. And I'm in a very privileged place to be able to take off work or work remotely for that time. So it just wasn't really realistic to plan this trip with anyone else either. Plus, it's a huge opportunity to push yourself outside your comfort zone and really see what you're capable of doing in those uncomfortable spaces. I'm naturally someone who is a bit more shy, especially when I meet new people. So don't get it twisted. It is uncomfortable for me. I've traveled quite a bit, but it's still a little bit anxious, a little bit nerve wracking to go somewhere solo. But that's kind of how the decision was made to come on this trip.
I love that so much. Yeah, you can't wait around for people because the trip will never happen. Everyone says that they want to do it, but then when the time comes, like just planning it is so logistically challenging. But were you nervous at all to go to that part of the world? Because, I mean, obviously there's a big language barrier. You've never been there before
Hmm.
and you're about to go over there by yourself.
Hmm.
So were you nervous at all? And like, were those nerves valid or was it a lot easier than you thought?
A lot of it was, of course, my own perception and lack of, experience in this region of the world. I've only seen what I've seen maybe on people's social media or on the news. I had actually very little understanding. I saw some friends come here directly out of college. That was already maybe 7 years ago now. And ever since then, I just always had the desire to go here. A lot of people, when I told them I'm coming, let alone solo, first question is, well, is it safe? Are you sure? Are you going to be okay? And to that, I always respond, it's not necessarily safe where we live right now. Chicago isn't safe. New York isn't necessarily safe. I choose not to let that hold me back. Of course, you always need to be vigilant, especially as a solo female traveler. But you would be surprised. I felt so much more safe in many of the countries I visited than in my own home state or city, even. The language barrier. So I was nervous coming here. I didn't really know necessarily what to expect. And it's the biggest solo trip that I've done. I did go to China right after college for a month solo. So I do feel like having that under my belt, I was like, I can do anything. If I showed up in China by myself, I can figure this out. But it was still nerve-wracking. That was quite a long time ago. So the language barrier itself, most people speak English, even in this region of the world. And
Oh,
when
wow.
they
Okay.
don't, it's just, you can usually just get communicated what you need communicated with your hands, or you just pull out Google Translate, and I always just smile until we figure it out. But most people speak English. Truly, it's mind-blowing, and it's such a privilege for us as English speakers to easily be able to navigate. So the language barrier has really been the least of my concerns. And yeah, I've of course been vigilant, but I felt very safe. Everyone is very kind. They're happy to have tourists here. We help support their economy like tourism does anywhere, Hawaii, wherever it is. It's part of their living. And so they're very happy to have people here, and they're just very kind people in general, most people that I've met in Southeast Asia. So a lot of the things that were of concern have not been an issue at all. And it's one of those things I really, truly wish everyone could experience at some time, because we all live with this narrative or this perception in our head, and it's completely different.
I love that. I was just talking to my friend about this the other week because her and her boyfriend were in the Philippines, but he was going for work. So they like flew separately. And she was saying that she was so nervous to fly over because her boyfriend went first and he had a
Mhm.
layover in Tokyo, and he like landed in Tokyo, and it turns out that his like connecting flight was at another airport 90 minutes away, but they have a
Oh, no.
little like train or something. Like
Okay.
it's
Okay.
the same airport, but it's 90 minutes away. And he didn't know that. And everything was in Japanese. And he had no, like, what's the dollar over there? Yen or
Yen.
something. He had no currency. He couldn't speak anything. He couldn't find anyone that was English speaking. I was like, I would turn around and come home. I would be so scared. But so, yeah, there's obviously like little hiccups and stuff, but it's good that you didn't like run into any problems.
Yeah, for the most part, no. And in my mind, when you run into those problems, there's always someone that's going to be willing to help you. And at the end of the day, my mindset is always, that's going to make for a great story. And that's going to be something that I'm going to look back and laugh on. And so that's just my mindset in a lot of things. If something goes wrong, I will figure it out. I'm capable, and I will laugh about it at some point in the future. And there's someone that's going to help me. I just got to ask for it and not be embarrassed or whatever it might be. It's all going to work itself out.
Yeah, definitely. So how long have you been traveling for at this point? And do you have a date for when you're definitively coming home? Because I know you said you were just kind of playing it by ear, which I love. I feel like that's the best way to do it if you're just going to be like an extended trip.
Yeah, for so long, it's hard to plan 3.5 months day by day in advance. So I do have a time that I'm coming home. It will be mid-April. I left on New Year's Eve. So it's been about 2.5 months at this point. I have maybe another month or so in me. Before I left, I kind of did tentatively set some dates because I wanted to know when I could start saying yes to a lot of these gigs that were asking me to come and speak in person. So I said yes to one that was mid-April, and that became kind of my deadline to return home. So mid-April is when I need to be back in Iowa, as I have in-person commitments. So another month or so, and in total, I'll wrap up probably 3.5 months in Southeast Asia.
Did you? Because I definitely want to talk about all of the financial aspects of traveling as well, but I don't remember. Did you break your lease, or did your lease end? Are you still paying for a place back in Iowa, or like what are your expenses looking like right now?
This is a huge part of my financial story. And I want to say something right now that for me feels vulnerable, but I feel like someone needs to hear it. Someone out there needs to hear it. This past year, and since I've been self-employed, I have not been a six-figure earner, and I haven't even necessarily been close to that. And I've still been able to do so many things. A lot of it all comes back to the intentional financial decision making that I've put into practice that has allowed me, talk about the name of this podcast, to design a life that I truly love and enjoy without earning a massive income. That's what happens when you can become incredibly intentional with your financial decisions and your goals. One of those things being, I did break my lease or ended my lease, left as it came up in May of 2024. I was living with a friend in an apartment, and the cost of living wasn't that much. I think by the time we split it in Cedar Rapids, Iowa, it was like $800 each. After utilities, $1,000. But for most Americans, housing, transportation, and food are our big three expenses. When you can focus on those things and reducing those costs, you are able to start moving the needle so much more than canceling your Netflix subscription or stop buying coffee out. The little things add up, sure, but those big three is where you can really start moving the needle. At the end of our lease, I just had this feeling, and in my corporate job, I moved around in a rotational program. I've always just kind of felt on the move. There's part of me that maybe subconsciously doesn't want to settle. I'm also single, so, still trying to figure things out. I felt like at the end of my lease, thinking about myself being in this position 1 year from now scared me. And I just felt like, okay, I don't know what I want to do next, but the thought of doing the same thing for another year, I know I don't want to do. That wasn't a very sophisticated way to say that. So I didn't know what was happening next, but I knew I loved to travel. I knew that if I reduced this huge housing expense, I'd have even more opportunity to do that. And so that's what I did. I didn't have a ton of stuff. I moved it into my parents' place. I stayed with them when I was home and I started to travel. I headed immediately that summer to Europe for a couple months, lived, worked, traveled, had fun, all of the things, and kind of have been doing that on and off for the past, gosh, I guess it's March, almost 10 months now. So that's been a huge financial piece for me that has allowed me to do this. My costs at home, because I've paid off my debt, I think my only cost at home is $60 for my car insurance. I don't have a housing expense right now. My car is paid off. I don't have a gym member, all of those other things I was able to cancel as I knew I was leaving. So I've been incredibly intentional with reducing those expenses. And so you want to talk about how have you saved money or how have you budgeted? Well, really, it's just now my life budget, right? It's not like I have all these expenses at home and I've saved this $1,000 or $2,000. It's just now my active income is able to go directly towards this. And so I know a lot of times from the outside perspective, just to be real again, it's easy to look at someone doing something like this and think, how luxurious, how amazing, I'm jealous or I'm envious. And sure, that's fair. But also, from my perspective, a lot of times I look back at friends or family and I think, wow, how amazing. You have a house that you're settled in and you have a routine. It's just a reminder that the grass is always greener. The comparison is a thief of joy, all of that. So finding balance and being present and where you're at right now is the most important. I feel like I've spent and wasted so much time being in a phase of life that's incredible, but wishing I was somewhere else or, beating myself up for not being as successful in whatever way I described that, making money, having a house, whatever it might be. And so just another message. I want to keep it real on all of those fronts, emotionally,
No, I love
financially.
that. And
All
thank
of
you
that.
for sharing that. No, because I think that's super inspiring because I do think a lot of people say, like, well, when I increase my income, then I'll be able to save for the big trip. And like, that is a really good story of whatever you want to, like, you can make it happen. You just, again, like, you can't afford everything. So there will have to be some trade-offs. So like you're not
100%.
going to be able to still pay for your $2,000 a month apartment and also be able to travel without spending a ton of money every single month. So that is such a good kind of like message. I want to kind of circle back to the work aspect because
Hmm.
obviously most people who do an extended trip will still have to work. And I know for me,
Hmm.
when I'm not in my like actual location, it's kind of hard to focus. Have you been able to get into a groove? Because I could also see the flip side of that where you have so much alone time and you're like by yourself a lot and you're in these new places. Like, have you been getting spurts of creativity? Has it been helpful in the work aspect?
I've definitely had spurts of creativity because I feel this sense of like being more alive as I visit these new places and see these new things. I will say the biggest downfall to being a digital nomad, to being remote and being on the move is the lack of routine. Now, I'm hyper conscious of that because I've done this before. I've done the trips and I've had a friend with me who wasn't working. And I was like, this is too difficult. I can't just take 6 weeks off. I mean, I can, but then I'm not earning money. I feel behind and it just feels chaotic. And I don't get to enjoy myself because in my head, I'm like, well, I'm supposed to be working, but now I feel like I'm on vacation, all of these things. So the style of travel that I try to be really conscious about now, and the reason I want to spend 3.5 months in this place is because I want to find a place where I can settle in and get as much as routine as possible. People that are on vacation are stopping in these same cities that I'm in for maybe 2, 3, 4 nights. I'm spending 2, 3, 4 weeks in one location, not because you need that much time to see everything, but because I want to go slow. I want to be able to sit down and work, settle in a place, not be packing up my bags every couple days. I want to try to find that routine when I'm going. My style of travel as a digital nomad is a bit more, it's just easy to describe as kind of slow travel, so that I can try to find that routine and also balance it with enjoying life, seeing the sights on the nights and weekends and not feel like I'm rushing around. So it's a struggle to find a routine. And especially when you're moving around, even, moving around every 2, 3 weeks is still frequent, but it's just trying to find a balance. It's never going to be perfect, but it's just part of the trade-off, I suppose, of being able to have this experience.
Yeah, definitely. And I'm sure the slower travel kind of coincides with lower costs as well because you're not
Hmm.
getting on a train or a flight every 2 or 3
Exactly.
days. I know on your socials you break down a lot of the costs that you're incurring while you're traveling, but can you give us like a high level idea of, because obviously that part of the world is, like you said, a little bit more affordable once you get over there. So what kind of costs are we looking at here?
Oh my gosh, Southeast Asia is mind blowing as to how cheap it is. Of course, the flight in itself to get from the US over here is going to run you maybe 1,000 to a couple $1,000s. But once you're here, I mean, I just had dinner tonight that was $2. Coffee is maybe $1 to $2. It is incredibly cheap as far as food and drink. Your housing costs, I've probably stayed on average within $20 to $30 a night for housing. And that's been between hotels, Airbnbs, private rooms, and hostels. So all very comfortable spaces. Now, financially, I am in the place where I don't have to ball on such a hardcore budget. So if there's something that I see that's a little bit more expensive, I'm probably going to do it because I want to enjoy my time and be in a space as I'm working that, I feel comfortable in. But even then, still probably within $20 to $30 a night. So I would say, excluding your flight, international flight, you could come to Southeast Asia and probably travel on $1,000 a month, even, especially if you're with someone and you're now splitting those housing costs or whatever it might be. So it's a very, very affordable place to come. But I think wherever you want to go, having flexibility in your dates and your location is what's going to allow your dollar to go the furthest. I travel to a lot of places that are very touristy and can be very expensive. But when I go on the off season, maybe the trade off is the weather a little bit and maybe some activities, but it's a third of the cost as far as flights. And you also see a different side of the city without so many other people around you. So having that flexibility in a sense can allow you to go many different places outside of even Southeast Asia on a budget.
And have you been able to just kind of book your accommodations on a whim? Like you don't book anything ahead of time?
I do, yeah. I would say maybe a couple weeks in advance is when I book things. And all of these cities are so massive that there's ample supply. I'm sure, if I had done it even more in advance, maybe I could have found a cooler place at a better price or whatnot. But that's just part of the trade off. Having an open schedule also allows you to change your plans. If you meet someone or they're like, oh no, you have to go here. So it's a trade-off, but yeah, it's still very easy to find accommodation in the last minute. The one thing is booking flights last minute can be slightly more expensive, but even then, not all that terrible.
Okay, and what has your itinerary? Sorry, I feel like I'm like grilling you with
No, I
questions. Well,
love
what
it.
has your itinerary been? Because you said you're in Hanoi, Vietnam right now, but where have
Yes.
you been and where are you going?
So I flew from the US through Seoul, South Korea on Delta, and I flew on my mom's benefit, so I had some flexibility. So that was a 15-hour flight. So I decided to stop there and enjoy a couple nights in Seoul before hopping on another 6-hour flight down to Southeast Asia. So stayed in Seoul for a couple nights and then started in Ho Chi Minh City, Vietnam. When I got there, I had no other flights, nothing else planned besides that Airbnb that I was staying in. I stayed 2 to 3 weeks there. And then I flew to Cambodia to a city called Siem Reap, very much known for their temples, which were immaculate and insane. An incredibly cheap place to visit. I mean, cocktails on the street were from $1 to $5 at restaurants. My mind was absolutely blown. I stayed a week there because it was a bit of a smaller city, and in the style of living and working, I kind of want to be in the bigger cities where I have coffee shop options and kind of a lot going on. So I stayed a week there and then I flew to Bangkok, Thailand, stayed a couple weeks there. flew down to an island in Thailand, took a little bit of a mini vacation. I went to Koh Samui, Thailand for 3 days, got hit with food poisoning. So went down really, really hard there. Then flew to Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia, stayed there for 2.5 weeks, took another little mini vacation to Singapore for 2, 3 nights. And then from Singapore, flew up here to Hanoi, wrapped back around to Vietnam. Because Vietnam's a very long, skinny country. So very different climates in the south and the north. So figured a couple months later, it'll be a little nicer here. And I'll be here for 3 weeks or so until I eventually figure out how I'm making my way back home, because I don't have a flight since I'm using my mom's benefits. So that's been my itinerary. And I know it feels like a lot, but I've spent anywhere from 1 to 3 weeks in each of those places, which has, again, allowed me to just settle a little bit more, work, enjoy, and get to know the city on a deeper level. That's another thing in the season of travel that I desire, is to not rush around, see the sights, take the pictures, check it off my list, put it in my Instagram bio, move on to the next country. I want to meet the people. I want to go to the places beyond the tourist sites. I want to chill. And I just want I want to get to know the city on a deeper level is the best way to describe it. And having more time allows you to do that. So yeah, that's been my route so far.
I agree with that. I studied abroad for a semester in Florence, Italy, and we traveled a ton. I went to like 12 different countries. We were just like hopping around Europe the whole time.
Yeah.
But Florence was the only place that I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm obsessed with that city, because I got to see it on a deeper level than just staying 1, maybe 2 nights in a place and doing kind of like the high level touristy stuff. So I totally get that. Do you have a place that's been your favorite so far?
Vietnam as a whole has been my favorite. I've enjoyed everywhere. The people are truly so kind. The food is amazing. The cost is low. Ho Chi Minh City, again, this goes back to the conversation we just had. I stayed 1 week in an Airbnb because a friend came with me over here. After he left, I found an area of the city from being there, from doing a little bit of research, that was outside the hustle and bustle. It was where foreigners, typically live when they work there. So not as touristy. It was so quaint. It was very residential. So I moved there for 2 weeks and I absolutely loved it, because it was just this whole different lens on the city and this little neighborhood almost, as opposed to the heart of downtown, which was great as well. But I found Vietnam to be very friendly. It's very chaotic with all the traffic, but at the same time, it's so quaint. These cities don't have these massive sky rises. Everything's maybe not more than 5 stories. It's old. The food is good. So I think Vietnam, there's just like this feeling that I got when I arrived back in Hanoi, and it sounds like a little bit dramatic, but it's like, oh, I just kind of feel like I'm at home a little bit. I've really, really enjoyed Vietnam.
I've actually heard that, because I think Thailand gets all the hype. And when I was in college and I did come home from studying abroad, I really wanted to do another semester. And I was like, Thailand is the only place I'm going to be able to afford. So like I was planning that, and then COVID happened and it just wasn't going to happen. But I feel like Thailand gets all the hype, but everyone says that Vietnam is actually, like, I don't want to say nicer, because they're definitely like different, but I've heard that Vietnam is a little bit more like of an underrated place.
Thailand does get a lot of the hype, and I genuinely enjoyed Thailand as well. But I don't know, Vietnam, just something about it, in my experience, has put it at the top of my list.
Yeah, I love that. Well, we're about to wrap up, but is there anything else that you want to tell someone if they're maybe considering solo travel, but they're afraid, or anything, maybe some like advice after doing this for a couple of months?
Yeah, I think a general just lens on life that I live by is I don't want to look back in a couple years when life is naturally probably going to become more complicated with a partner, a house, or children, whatever it's going to be, and think, I wish I would have done that. Right? Like, I truly believe right now is the best time to take advantage of these sorts of experiences. And I sit at these sides of the streets in this little plastic chair eating pho in Vietnam. And I look around and I'm like, wow, imagine I wasn't here because I was too scared to leave my hometown, or I heard someone say, I don't know if it's safe. I just have these moments where it's like complete awe of what could have been if I didn't have that courage to step outside of my comfort zone. And it's truly life-changing. So I just give you you that same encouragement to see it with your own eyes and know that you are capable of handling yourself and managing, whether it's solo travel or with someone in a new place, you can do it. And financially, you, as you said, and there's a personal finance creator, I want to say is like Paula Pant coined the term of you, oh gosh, I'm going to probably
Oh,
say it
you can
wrong now.
afford anything, but not everything.
Yeah,
Yes.
it goes back
Yes.
to if you get super specific, if you make some of those hard decisions of I'm going to move out of my apartment, that's not necessarily easy. That's not a decision that's taken lightly. It takes time, it takes energy. But if you decide to make those decisions, live your life a little bit differently than the norm, you can create other opportunities for yourself. So just remembering that you are in control of those things, and all of these opportunities are on the other side of becoming financially literate, getting in control of your money, and having the courage to make decisions that maybe are a little bit outside of the norm. So, yeah.
Yeah, I love that. That is such a good message. And can you tell everyone where they can find you and how they can work with you?
Yes, under the handle Little Miss Finance is where you'll find me on social media on Instagram and TikTok, or thelittlemissfinance.com gives you all the backstory, all of my services. So you can get in touch there through my website, whether you want to work one-on-one or you'd like to see someone like me in your workplace. I would appreciate the introduction to get the foot in the door. But yeah, you'll find me online under Little Miss Finance.
Yay. And we will put all of your socials and everything in the show notes of this episode as well. But thanks, Malia, for coming on to the Life You Love podcast. And thanks everyone for listening.
Bye.